When a billionaire's car crashes into the same mountain storm that stranded a widowed father and his son, nobody expects what happens next. Trapped together in an abandoned cabin as temperatures plummet to deadly levels, two people from completely different worlds are forced to confront the walls they've built around their broken hearts. What starts as survival becomes something neither of them saw coming, something that will change everything they thought they knew about love, loss, and second chances. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey reaches. The headlights barely cut through the white chaos anymore. Mason Reed's knuckles had gone pale against the steering wheel, his jaw tight as he squinted through the windshield where snow attacked in horizontal sheets. The wipers couldn't keep up. Every few seconds, the world disappeared completely, just white noise and the howl of wind trying to flip the truck off the mountain road. "Dad?" Caleb's voice came small from the passenger seat. "Are we lost?" "No, buddy. We're fine." The lie tasted bitter. Mason had no idea where they were. The GPS had died 20 minutes ago, and the last road sign he'd seen might as well have been in another state. Just a little snow, nothing we can't handle. 10 years old, and Caleb still believed him when he said things like that, still trusted his father had all the answers. Mason gripped the wheel tighter and tried to ignore the way the truck shuddered each time a gust hit them broadside. This was supposed to be simple. 2 days away from Chicago, away from the apartment that still smelled like Sarah's perfume 3 years after she died, away from the neighborhood where every street corner reminded him of the life they'd planned together, the one that ended in a hospital room with machines beeping and doctors using words like "nothing more we can do." Just him and Caleb, mountains, quiet, a chance to breathe without feeling like his chest was full of broken glass. Except now the storm had them, and breathing was the least of his problems. The engine coughed. "Dad?" "It's okay." Mason pressed the gas. Nothing. The engine coughed again, sputtered, and then went silent. Momentum carried them forward another 50 feet before the truck rolled to a stop in the middle of the road, or what Mason hoped was still the road. Hard to tell when everything looked the same shade of white death. "Why'd we stop?" "Engine trouble." Mason turned the key. Click, click. Nothing. He tried again, same result. "Stay here." "Where are you going?" "Just checking something, 2 minutes." The cold hit him like a fist the moment he opened the door. Wind tore the breath from his lungs, and snow immediately plastered his face, his jacket, every exposed inch of skin. He stumbled to the hood, popped it, and stared at the engine like he had any idea what he was looking at. Didn't matter. Even if he could diagnose the problem, he had no tools, no parts, and no business standing out here while the temperature tried to kill him. Back in the truck, Caleb watched him with those wide brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, and Mason felt something crack inside his chest. "Can you fix it?" "Not here." Mason grabbed his phone. No signal. Of course not. They were somewhere on Black Ridge Mountain, miles from anything resembling civilization, and the storm was only getting worse. "We need to find shelter." "Like a house?" "Something like that." Through the passenger window, barely visible through the snow, Mason spotted a dark shape between the trees. Could be a boulder, could be a building, could be nothing. But sitting here meant freezing to death, so nothing wasn't really an option. "Bundle up, we're going to walk a little." Caleb didn't argue, which meant he understood how serious this was. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. He pulled on his hat, his gloves, zipped his coat all the way up while Mason grabbed their emergency bag from the back. Flashlight, first aid kit, energy bars. A blanket that seemed laughably inadequate now. The wind tried to rip the door off its hinges when Mason opened it. He caught Caleb's hand and pulled him close, shielding him as much as possible as they pushed into the storm. Walking felt like moving through cement. Every step required conscious effort, and the cold attacked from every angle, biting through his jeans, his jacket, freezing the moisture in his nose. Caleb pressed against his side, head down, and Mason kept one arm around him while they fought toward the dark shape between the trees. "Please be real. Please be something we can use." It was a cabin, small, half buried in snow, windows dark and door barely visible beneath an overhang thick with icicles. Mason didn't care if it was condemned, didn't care if it was somebody's property. Survival trumped trespassing. The door was unlocked, frozen shut, but unlocked, Mason put his shoulder into it once, twice, and on the third hit, it gave way with a crack of ice. They stumbled inside, and even the musty darkness felt like paradise compared to the hell outside. Stay by the door. Mason clicked on the flashlight and swept it across the interior. One room, stone fireplace on the far wall, dusty furniture covered in what might have been sheets or might have been spider webs, shelves with old cans and jars, a small table, 2 chairs, a narrow cot against the side wall. Nobody had been here in years, maybe decades, but it had walls and a roof and a door they could close, which made it the best option they had. Is this safe? Caleb's teeth chattered. Safer than outside. Mason checked the fireplace. Someone had left wood stacked beside it, old, dry, perfect. He found matches in a drawer, crumpled some paper from the bag, and within minutes had a weak flame going. Come here, warm up. Caleb crouched by this fire, holding his hands toward it like it was the best thing he'd ever seen. Maybe it was. Mason wrapped the blanket around his shoulders, then checked the windows. Snow piled against the glass. Wind screamed through gaps in the wood. This place would hold for now, but if the storm lasted through the night, he couldn't think about that. One problem at a time. Dad? Caleb looked up at him. Are we gonna die? The question hit harder than the cold had. Mason knelt beside him, put a hand on his shoulder. No, we're gonna be fine, I promise. Another lie. But what else could he say? They sat by the fire while the storm raged outside, and Mason fed more wood into the flames, trying to ignore how fast their small pile was disappearing. The cabin warmed slightly, enough to stop shivering, not enough to feel comfortable. Caleb curled up against him, and Mason told him stories about when he and Sarah had gone camping before he was born, back when they thought they had all the time in the world. He was mid-sentence when someone knocked on the door. Mason froze. Caleb sat up, eyes wide. What was that? Stay here. Mason stood slowly, grabbed the flashlight. The knock came again, sharp, desperate, definitely human. He crossed to the door, hesitated with his hand on the handle. Could be another stranded traveler, could be trouble. Out here in the middle of nowhere, both options seemed equally possible. The knock became pounding. Please! A woman's voice, muffled by wind. Please, I need help! Mason opened the door. She fell through it, more stumble than step, and he caught her before she hit the floor. Snow covered her from head to foot, in her hair, on her clothes, crusted on her eyelashes. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. My car, the road, I couldn't. It's okay. You're safe. Mason guided her toward the fire. Sit down, Caleb. Get the other blanket from the bag. The woman collapsed by the fireplace, and in the flickering light, Mason got his first real look at her. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair plastered to her skull. Expensive coat, the kind that cost more than his truck, but torn and soaked through. Her hands shook as she held them toward the flames. Thank you. She looked up at him, and something in her eyes made him pause. Recognition, maybe, though he couldn't place from where. I thought I was going to die out there. You're not going to die. Mason grabbed the blanket from Caleb and wrapped it around her shoulders. What happened? My car slid off the road, maybe a mile back. She pulled the blanket tighter. I tried to stay with it, but the cold, I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. I saw lights through the trees and just started walking. There aren't any lights here. I know, I think, she laughed, sharp and brittle. I think I was hallucinating, but I found you anyway, so maybe that counts for something. Caleb stared at her with open curiosity. What's your name? Victoria. She managed a weak smile. What's yours? Caleb. That's my dad, Mason. Nice to meet you both. Victoria's gaze shifted to Mason. I'm sorry for barging in like this. I didn't know what else to do. Don't apologize. Nobody should be out in that. Mason checked the door, made sure it was secure. The wind had picked up even more, if that was possible. We're stuck here until the storm passes. Might as well be stuck together. How long do you think that'll be? No idea. Could be hours. Could be longer. He didn't mention the other possibility, that the storm might last days, that their supplies wouldn't hold, that the cabin might not protect them if things got worse. No point scaring her more than she already was. Victoria pulled off her gloves, designer, ruined, and held her hands closer to the fire. Now that she wasn't covered in snow, Mason noticed details. The coat was Burberry, the boots were custom leather. The watch on her wrist probably cost more than he made in a year. And her face… Wait! He tilted his head. You're Victoria Hayes. She went still. You recognize me. You're on the news. That tech thing. He tried to remember. AI company? Something about quantum computing? Neurovault Technologies. Her voice flattened. That's me. Caleb's eyes widened. Are you famous? Some people think so. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Most people just know I'm rich. Are you? Caleb? Mason started, but Victoria waved him off. It's fine. Yes, I'm rich. Very rich. She looked at the boy. Does that bother you? No, I think it's cool. Caleb grinned. Do you have a mansion? I have a penthouse in Chicago, 42nd floor. Do you have a pool? Indoor and outdoor. That's awesome. Caleb looked at Mason. Dad, she has 2 pools. I heard. Mason studied Victoria, trying to reconcile the woman on magazine covers with the one shivering by his fire. What are you doing out here? Business trip. She pulled the blanket tighter. There's a tech conference in Denver. I was supposed to meet some investors, close a deal. Took the scenic route because my assistant said the mountains were beautiful this time of year. They are. Usually. Mason glanced at the window. Not so much right now. No. Victoria followed his gaze. Not so much right now. The fire crackled. Wind howled. Somewhere in the darkness, something creaked. Probably a tree branch, but it sounded like the cabin itself was protesting their presence. I should make coffee. Mason stood. If there's any here. There was, in a sealed container on one of the shelves, along with an old percolator that looked like it belonged in a museum. Mason filled it with snow from outside, set it near the fire to melt, and tried to remember the last time he'd made coffee like this. Camping trip with Sarah. 10 years ago. Different mountains. Different life. Can I help? Victoria had stood, still wrapped in the blanket. You can sit down and get warm. I've been sitting for 2 hours in a frozen car. I need to move. She crossed to him. Please. I'm going crazy just sitting there. Up close, she was taller than he'd expected. 5'9", maybe 5'10", and despite the expensive clothes and the penthouse and the 2 pools, she looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that had nothing to do with hiking through a blizzard. Fine. You can watch me make terrible coffee. I'm good at that. She leaned against the counter. Watching people do things is basically my whole job. Thought your job was quantum computing. My job is signing papers and making decisions and looking confident in boardrooms. Victoria watched him measure out coffee grounds. Other people do the actual computing. Must be nice. It's boring. She said it without inflection, like she was commenting on the weather. Do you know what my last board meeting was about? A 3-hour argument over whether our new AI interface should use a blue gradient or a teal gradient. 3 hours. For color choice that affects absolutely nothing. Mason poured water into the percolator. So why do you do it? Because I'm good at it. Because I built the company from nothing and everyone expects me to keep building. Because if I stop, I don't know what I'd do instead. Victoria paused. That sounds pathetic, doesn't it? Sounds honest. Same thing. The coffee started perking. Mason found 3 mugs that looked reasonably clean and set them by the fire. Caleb had curled up on the cot, fighting sleep but losing. Good. Let him sleep. Easier than being scared. Your son seems sweet. Victoria's voice had softened. He is. Too sweet sometimes. Mason pulled the blanket over Caleb's shoulders. Worries about everyone else before himself. He gets that from you? What makes you say that? You opened the door. Could have left me out there, kept yourself and your son safe. But you opened the door. She met his eyes. Most people wouldn't have. Most people aren't freezing to death in a blizzard. You'd be surprised. Victoria turned back to the fire. I've been left out in the cold plenty of times, just usually more metaphorical. Mason poured coffee into the mugs, handed her one. She wrapped both hands around it like it was precious, and they stood in silence for a moment, listening to the storm tear itself apart outside. Can I ask you something? Victoria's voice was quiet. Why are you out here, middle of nowhere, middle of winter, just you and your kid? Needed a break from Chicago. That's not an answer. It's the one I've got. Mason sipped his coffee. Terrible. Just like he'd predicted. What about you? Really? Business trip doesn't explain taking a mountain road in a snowstorm. Victoria stared into her mug. I was running. From what? Everything. She laughed, soft and broken. My life, my company, my apartment, my schedule, my handlers, my investors, my board. All of it. I thought if I could just get away for a few days, take a different route, see something that wasn't scheduled or planned or designed to maximize my productivity. She stopped. Sorry, you don't need to hear this. I asked. Yeah, but you were being polite. You don't actually care about the existential crisis of a billionaire who has everything and feels like she has nothing. Maybe I do. Mason sat down on the floor by the fire, gestured for her to join him. Maybe I know what that feels like. Victoria hesitated, then sat. Not close, but not far. How could you possibly know what this feels like? Different reasons. Same feeling. He stared at the flames. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer, fast kind. Diagnosis to funeral in 8 months. And after, everyone kept telling me how strong I was, how amazing it was that I kept going for Caleb, how inspiring my resilience was. But you didn't feel strong. I felt empty, like I was going through the motions of a life I didn't recognize anymore. And the worst part was everyone expected me to be okay eventually, get back to normal, move on. He turned the mug in his hands. But there is no normal anymore. There's just pretending until you're too tired to keep pretending. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't cause it. I'm sorry anyway. She sipped her coffee, made a face. This is terrible. Told you. Worth it anyway. She looked at Caleb, sleeping peacefully despite everything. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. Only reason I get out of bed most days. Mason fed another log to the fire. What about you? Any kids? God, no. Can't even keep a relationship longer than 6 months. Kids would be a disaster. 6 months seems specific. That's when they figure out I'm married to my company and they're just a distraction. Victoria's smile was sharp. Usually there's a fight, sometimes tears. Always an exit. I've gotten good at exits. Sounds lonely. It is. She said it simply like she was describing the weather again. But lonely is safe. Lonely means nobody can leave you because they were never really there to begin with. Mason understood that better than he wanted to admit. He'd built his own version of the same walls, different materials, same purpose. Keep everyone at arm's length. Protect Caleb, protect yourself. Don't let anyone close enough to hurt you again. The wind slammed against the cabin so hard the walls shook. Victoria flinched, and without thinking, Mason moved closer. Not touching, just close enough that she could feel someone else was there. It'll pass, he said. Storm like this, it burns itself out eventually. You don't know that. No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. He looked at her. Sometimes that's all you can do. Choose to believe things get better even when you've got no proof. Victoria met his eyes, and something shifted in her expression. You really mean that? Wouldn't say it if I didn't. Everyone in my world says things they don't mean. It's like breathing to them. She set down her mug. But you're different, aren't you? I'm a single dad from Chicago who fixes HVAC systems for a living. Not much different about that. You'd be surprised. Victoria pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The people I know, they'd sell their souls for a better quarterly report. But you carried your son through a blizzard and opened your door to a stranger. That's different. Mason didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in silence, listening to the storm, and slowly the space between them began to feel less like the gap between two strangers and more like something else. Something neither of them had words for yet. Tell me about her. Victoria's voice was soft. Your wife. Why? Because you loved her. And because I want to understand what that feels like. Mason studied her face, looking for mockery or pity, but found only genuine curiosity. Sarah, that was her name, Sarah Reed. We met in college. She was studying architecture. I was doing engineering. Total opposites. She wanted to build museums and libraries. I wanted to fix broken things. He smiled at the memory. We had this stupid argument our first week about whether form or function mattered more, lasted 3 hours. Ended with us getting coffee because we were both too stubborn to walk away. Who won? Neither of us. That was kind of our thing. We'd argue about everything, never agree, and somehow that worked. He picked at the edge of his mug. She made me better. Made me want to be better. And when Caleb was born, God, she was so happy. Like everything she'd ever wanted just fell into place. What happened? Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. She fought like hell for 8 months, but his voice cracked slightly. Some fights you can't win. Victoria reached out slowly and put her hand on his. Just rested it there, warm and real. I'm sorry, Mason. Me too. He looked at their hands, hers soft and manicured, his rough and scarred from years of manual work. Different worlds. But in this moment, in this cabin, none of that seemed to matter. What about you? Ever come close to that kind of thing? Once. Long time ago. Victoria withdrew her hand, wrapped both arms around herself. His name was Daniel. Met him in grad school before I started the company. He was brilliant, wanted to cure diseases, save the world, all of that. I loved him for it. What happened? I chose my company over him, multiple times. Missed his graduation because of a board meeting. Skipped his sister's wedding for an investor call. And one day he looked at me and said, "You're going to be very successful and very alone." Then he left. She stared at the fire. He was right about both. You could change that. Could I? I've built an empire on being ruthless, on putting the company first, always. Every relationship I've had since Daniel has ended the same way. They realize I'm not going to change, and they leave. And honestly, she laughed bitterly, I don't blame them. I wouldn't date me either. I don't believe that. You don't know me. I know you've been here for 2 hours and you helped make coffee when you could have just sat by the fire. I know you asked about my son instead of complaining about your situation. I know you're sitting here having a real conversation instead of checking your phone every 5 seconds. Mason met her eyes. Maybe the people who left didn't know the real you. Maybe the real me isn't worth knowing. Or maybe you just haven't let anyone see her in a long time. Victoria stared at him, something vulnerable flickering across her face. Why are you being nice to me? Why wouldn't I be? Because I'm a billionaire CEO who's probably going to sue someone tomorrow and fire half my staff next week, and she stopped herself. Sorry, that was unfair. Yeah, it was. Mason stood, stretched. But I'm going to be nice to you anyway, not because of what you do or how much money you have, because right now in this cabin, you're just Victoria, and Victoria needed help, so I helped. He grabbed another log for the fire. Simple as that. She watched him add wood to the flames, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Nobody's called me just Victoria in 10 years. Maybe they should more often. Maybe. She stood, moved closer to the fire, closer to him. Thank you. For this. For... She gestured vaguely. All of it. Thank me when we get out of here alive. Deal. The storm continued its assault through the night. Wind screamed, snow piled higher, the temperature inside the cabin dropped steadily, and Mason kept feeding the fire, watching their wood supply dwindle and trying not to think about what happened when it ran out. Victoria sat beside him, and slowly, inevitably, the cold drove them closer together, shoulders touching, then sitting side by side beneath the shared blanket. Nothing romantic, just survival, just two people trying to stay warm. But Mason felt it anyway, that spark of something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Connection. The kind that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with recognition, like finding someone who spoke the same language of loneliness you'd been speaking alone for years. Mason? Victoria's voice was drowsy. Can I ask you something else? Sure. Do you think people can change? Really change? He considered that. I think people can choose to be different. Whether that's the same as changing, I don't know. Why? Because I don't like who I've become. And I don't know if I can go back to being someone I'd actually want to be. She leaned her head against his shoulder, tentative, testing. Does that make sense? Yeah. He didn't pull away. It makes sense. They sat like that while the fire burned low, and Caleb slept, and the storm tried to tear the mountain apart. And somewhere in that darkness, both of them stopped performing, stopped being the strong single dad and the ruthless CEO, and just existed. Two broken people, keeping each other warm. Hey, Mason? Yeah? I haven't felt this safe in a very long time. He tightened his arm around her. Me neither. Outside, the blizzard raged on. Mason woke to the sound of Caleb coughing. He jerked upright, disoriented for a moment. The cabin was darker now, the fire reduced to embers, and Victoria was still asleep against his shoulder. He carefully shifted away from her, crossed to where Caleb lay curled on the cot. Hey, buddy. Mason pressed his hand to Caleb's forehead, warm but not feverish. You okay? Cold. Caleb's teeth chattered. Really cold, Dad. The cabin had turned into an icebox. Mason's breath came out in visible clouds, and when he touched the stone wall, frost had formed on the inside. The fire had almost died completely while he dozed off, stupid, reckless, and now the cold was winning. I know. Give me a minute. He grabbed the last few logs from their dwindling pile and built the fire back up, blowing on the embers until flames caught. Not enough wood left. Maybe enough to last until morning, maybe not. He'd have to go outside soon, find more, and the thought of stepping back into that storm made his chest tight. Is the lady still here? Caleb's voice was small. Yeah, she's right there. Mason glanced back at Victoria, who'd pulled the blanket tight around herself, still sleeping. Why? Just checking. I had a dream she disappeared. She's not going anywhere. None of us are until this storm stops. Mason rubbed Caleb's arms, trying to warm him up. How about some breakfast? We've got those granola bars in the bag. I'm not hungry. That was wrong. Caleb was always hungry. Mason felt his forehead again, more carefully this time. Definitely warmer than it should be. Does anything hurt? My throat. A little. Great, just perfect. Stranded in a blizzard with limited supplies, and now Caleb was getting sick. Mason forced himself to stay calm. Okay, we'll get some water in you, keep you warm. You're going to be fine. Promise? Promise. Another lie to add to the collection. But what else could he do? Tell his 10-year-old son that they might actually freeze to death up here if the storm didn't break soon? That their rescue depended entirely on luck and weather patterns Mason didn't understand? Victoria stirred, blinked awake. For a moment she looked confused, then memory seemed to catch up. Morning. Her voice was rough. What time is it? No idea. Maybe 6? 7? Mason had no way to tell. His phone was dead, and the storm had turned the world outside into one continuous twilight. How'd you sleep? Better than I should have. She sat up, rubbed her face. That's the first time I've slept through the night in months. Usually I wake up every 2 hours checking my phone. Well, no phone signal up here, nothing to check. Liberating. She looked around the cabin, taking in the frost on the windows, the weak fire. It's colder. Yeah, fire died down while I was asleep. Won't happen again. I should have stayed awake, kept watch. Not your job. Mason stood, stretched. His back ached from sleeping on the floor, and his right knee, the one he'd torn up playing high school football, throbbed in the cold. You needed rest. Victoria stood too, and Mason noticed she'd taken off her expensive coat at some point during the night. She wore a cashmere sweater underneath, gray and probably worth more than his monthly rent. It looked good on her. Not that he should be noticing things like that. Is Caleb okay? She'd caught the worry in his expression. Just cold. Maybe getting a cold. Mason grabbed one of the water bottles from his bag, helped Caleb sit up to drink. Nothing serious. You're a terrible liar. Yeah, well, it's all I've got right now. He made sure Caleb drank, then turned back to Victoria. We need more firewood. There's maybe 2 hours left in what we have. So we go get more. I go get more. You stay here with Caleb. That's ridiculous. 2 people can carry more than one. 2 people also means twice the chance of getting hurt or lost out there. I know these mountains. Spent summers camping here when I was a kid. I can handle it. Mason grabbed his coat. Besides, someone needs to stay with him. Victoria glanced at Caleb, then back at Mason. Fine, but if you're not back in 30 minutes, I'm coming after you. Deal. The storm hit him like a wall the moment he stepped outside. If anything, it had gotten worse overnight. Wind strong enough to knock him sideways, snow so thick he couldn't see 5 feet in any direction. He kept one hand on the cabin wall, using it to navigate around to the back, where he'd spotted a woodpile the night before. Please still be there. Please be real, and not just something I imagined in the dark. It was real. A tarp-covered stack of split logs, frozen together but usable. Mason grabbed as many as he could carry, which wasn't as many as he wanted. 3 trips. He'd need at least 3 trips to get enough wood to last the day, assuming the storm didn't kill him first. The cold was unreal. It attacked every exposed inch of skin, turned his fingers numb even through his gloves. By the second trip, he couldn't feel his face. By the third, he was stumbling, his legs refusing to cooperate properly. Victoria yanked the door open before he could reach it. Get inside! Now! He collapsed by the fire, and she slammed the door shut, immediately started pulling off his gloves. Your hands are blue. I'm fine. You're hypothermic. She rubbed his hands between hers, and the friction sent pins and needles shooting up his arms. This is insane. You should have let me help. Caleb needed someone here. Caleb needs his father alive. She kept rubbing, her hands surprisingly strong. Don't be stupid. Too late for that. Mason's teeth chattered so hard he could barely speak. Is he? He's fine, sleeping again. Victoria glanced at the cot where Caleb had curled up under both blankets. But you're not. Come here. She pulled him closer to the fire, wrapped one of the blankets around both of them. The warmth of her body helped more than the fire did, and gradually feelings started returning to his extremities. Painful, but better than numb. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me, just don't do that again. She was still holding his hands, and Mason realized how close they were sitting. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to smell her shampoo, something expensive and floral that seemed completely out of place in this frozen cabin. I had to. We needed the wood. Then we both go next time. I don't care what you say. Victoria's jaw was set. I didn't survive a car crash just to watch someone else die of stubbornness. Fair enough. Mason flexed his fingers, testing. Still stiff, but functional. How's the coffee situation? We have maybe 2 more pots worth. After that, we're out. Then we better make it count. He started to stand, but Victoria pulled him back down. You need to warm up first. 5 more minutes. I'm fine. You're not. Stop pretending. She tightened the blanket around them. Why do you do that? Act like everything's okay when it's clearly not? Because if I admit things are bad, then I have to deal with how bad they actually are. And right now, I can't afford that. Mason stared at the fire. I have to keep it together for Caleb. He's counting on me. He's 10. He probably knows more than you think. That's what scares me. Mason's voice dropped. After Sarah died, he stopped sleeping. Had nightmares every night for 6 months. Would wake up crying, asking if I was going to die too. And I'd sit there telling him everything was fine, we were fine, nothing bad was going to happen. But I didn't believe it. I was terrified every single day that something would happen to me and he'd be alone. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Is that why you're up here, trying to prove you can still take care of him? Maybe. I don't know. He rubbed his face. Everyone kept telling me I needed to move on, get back out there, start dating again, like Sarah was just some chapter I could close and start fresh. But how do you do that? How do you just stop loving someone because they're gone? You don't. Victoria's voice was soft. You just learn to carry it differently. You sound like you know. I don't. Not like you do. She pulled the blanket tighter. But I know what it's like to lose something you can't get back. To watch it slip away and know there's nothing you can do to stop it. Your company? My life. My real life. Before everything became about the company. She stared at nothing. I used to paint. Did you know that? In college, before I started Neurovault, I'd spend hours just painting. Nothing good, just whatever felt right, and I was happy doing it. But then the company took off, and suddenly I didn't have time for things that didn't generate revenue. So I stopped. Put the paints away, told myself I'd get back to it eventually. Did you? No. I sold them at a garage sale 3 years ago. Didn't even think twice about it. She laughed bitterly. That's when I knew I'd lost myself. When I could throw away the last thing that made me happy and feel nothing. Mason shifted to look at her. It's not too late. You could start again. Could I? Do you have any idea what my schedule looks like? I have 17 meetings this week. 17. And that's light. Last month, I flew to 4 different countries in 6 days, slept maybe 10 hours total, closed 2 major deals, and gave a keynote speech to 5,000 people. Then I went home to my empty apartment and ate takeout alone at midnight. She met his eyes. That's my life. There's no room in it for painting or happiness or anything that isn't making Neurovault more successful. Then change it. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're the CEO. You make the rules. The investors make the rules. The board makes the rules. The market makes the rules. Victoria pulled away slightly. I'm just the face they put on magazine covers. That's bullshit, and you know it. Mason's voice hardened. You built that company. You're Victoria Hayes. You could walk into any boardroom in the world, and people would listen. So if you're miserable, change it. If the company is killing you, let it go. Find something else. Easy for you to say. Is it? You think my life is easy? Mason stood up, the anger sudden and surprising. I lost my wife. I'm raising a kid alone on an HVAC tech salary. Half the time I have no idea what I'm doing. I miss parent-teacher conferences because I'm working overtime. I feed him frozen dinners because I can't cook worth a damn. And every single day I wonder if I'm screwing him up for life. He turned to face her. But I keep going because that's what you do. You don't get to quit just because things are hard. Victoria stood too, her own anger rising. Don't you dare lecture me about hard. You have no idea what it's like to build something from nothing and then watch everyone try to take it from you. Every day someone's trying to undermine me, replace me, prove I don't deserve what I've earned. I can't show weakness. I can't take breaks. I can't be anything except perfect, or they'll tear me apart. So let them. What? Let them tear you apart. Let them try. Mason stepped closer. Because here's the thing. You're already miserable. You're already alone. How much worse could it actually get? She stared at him, something raw flickering across her face. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Explain to me why being rich and successful and absolutely miserable is better than taking a chance on being happy. Because happy doesn't last. Victoria's voice cracked. Happy is what you have right before everything falls apart. Happy is what you lose. I'd rather be miserable and in control than happy and vulnerable. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Well, that's reality. She wrapped her arms around herself. You want to believe people can change, that second chances exist, that love conquers all. But that's just fairy tale garbage. Real life doesn't work that way. My wife died in my arms, telling me she loved me, that she was sorry she couldn't stay, that she wished we had more time. Mason's voice went quiet. And you know what I told her? That loving her was worth it, that I'd do it all again, even knowing how it ended, because the happy we had was real, and losing it didn't make it less real. Victoria looked away. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, you should have, because it's what you believe, and at least that's honest. He sat back down by the fire. You want to protect yourself by never caring about anything except your company? Fine. But don't pretend that's living. That's just a different kind of dying. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the howling wind outside. Caleb stirred on the cot, coughed again, and both of them turned to look at him. I should check on him. Victoria moved toward the cot before Mason could respond. She sat beside Caleb, put her hand on his forehead the way she'd probably seen Mason do. He's warm. I know. Do you have medicine, Tylenol, anything? In the first aid kit. Mason dug through the bag, found the children's Tylenol, measured out a dose. Victoria helped Caleb sit up, and the boy blinked at them groggily. Hey, kiddo. Victoria's voice had gentled completely. How are you feeling? Okay. Caleb took the medicine, made a face. That tastes bad. Yeah, medicine usually does. She smoothed his hair back. You need anything? Water? Food? Can you tell me a story? Victoria glanced at Mason, uncertain. I'm not really good at stories. Please? Just a short one. She looked trapped, and Mason almost intervened. But then something shifted in her expression, and she settled more comfortably on the edge of the cot. Okay, short one. Victoria thought for a moment. Once there was a woman who built a tower. Every day she'd add another floor, making it taller and taller until it reached the clouds. People would look up at her tower and say, "Wow, that's amazing. You must be so happy up there." But the woman wasn't happy, because the higher she built, the more alone she felt. And one day she realized that she'd spent so much time building up that she'd forgotten to build a door. Caleb frowned. That's a sad story. Yeah, it is. What happened to her? I don't know yet. Victoria's voice was barely audible. The story isn't finished. Can she build a door now? Maybe, if she's brave enough. Victoria looked at Mason. But being brave is hard when you've been alone for a long time. My dad's brave. Caleb's eyes were already closing again. He could help her. Maybe he could. Victoria stayed there until Caleb fell back asleep, then quietly returned to the fire. She sat next to Mason, not speaking, just staring at the flames. That was a good story, Mason said finally. It was depressing. Honest, though. Same thing. Victoria pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. I'm sorry for what I said before, about Happy being garbage. That was cruel. It was real. You don't have to apologize for being real. Yes, I do. Because you lost someone you loved, and I basically said that love doesn't matter. That's inexcusable. She rested her chin on her knees. Truth is, I'm jealous. You had something worth losing. I've never had that. Never let myself want it. Why not? Because my mother had it. She loved my father completely, gave up everything for him, her career, her dreams, her independence. And when he left, just walked out one day when I was 12, she fell apart. Couldn't function, couldn't work, could barely take care of me. I watched her destroy herself over someone who didn't deserve her love. Victoria's jaw tightened. I swore I'd never be that weak, never need anyone that much. So I built walls instead of relationships, made myself untouchable. How's that working out? Terribly. She laughed, sharp and broken. But at least nobody can hurt me. You're hurting yourself instead. Lesser of two evils. Mason wanted to argue, but what could he say? He'd built his own walls after Sarah died. Different reasons, same result. Both of them trapped in prisons of their own making. Can I tell you something? Victoria's voice was quiet. Last year, I had a panic attack during a board meeting. Middle of a presentation, couldn't breathe, thought I was dying. My assistant had to take me outside, and I spent 20 minutes in a bathroom stall trying to remember how to function. You know what I did after? What? Went back in and finished the presentation. Closed the deal, smiled for photos, then went home and cried for 3 hours. She looked at him. That's my life. Pretending I'm fine while I'm falling apart. Sound familiar? Yeah. Mason understood that better than he wanted to. After Sarah died, I had to go back to work after 2 weeks. 2 weeks to process losing my wife, and then it was back to fixing furnaces and pretending I gave a damn about whether Mrs. Henderson's thermostat worked. I'd be under someone's house, covered in dust and insulation, and I'd just break. Cry like a kid, then pull myself together before anyone could see. How long did that last? About a year. Maybe longer, hard to remember. He fed another log to the fire. Eventually the breakdowns got further apart, but they never really stopped. I just got better at hiding them. Do you think that ever goes away? The pretending? I don't know. Maybe some people figure out how to actually be okay, but I'm not one of them. Mason met her eyes, and I'm starting to think that's not the worst thing. Maybe being okay all the time is overrated, or maybe we're both just damaged and calling it wisdom. That too. He smiled slightly, but at least we're honest about being damaged. Victoria returned the smile, and for a moment the tension between them eased. Outside the storm continued, but inside the cabin, something had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore. Weren't just two people trapped by circumstance. They were something else. Something neither of them had words for yet. I need to check the wood situation. Mason stood, stretched. Figure out if we need to make another run. We're doing it together this time. Victoria together. That's not negotiable. She stood too. Besides, you said it yourself. I make the rules. CEO, remember? Pretty sure that authority doesn't extend to freezing mountain cabins. Watch me make it extend. She grabbed her coat. 5 minutes out, gather what we can carry, 5 minutes back. Quick and efficient. You sound like you're planning a corporate acquisition. I've done harder things in worse conditions. She zipped up her coat. I once closed a $60 million deal in Sao Paulo while I had food poisoning. A little snow doesn't scare me. Mason wanted to argue, but the determination in her eyes told him it would be pointless. Fine, but we stay together. No wandering off. Agreed. They bundled up, and Mason tied a rope between them, something he'd learned from his camping trips years ago. If one of them got disoriented or fell, the other would know. Victoria didn't question it, just let him secure the rope around her waist. The storm was worse than before. The moment they stepped outside, wind nearly knocked Victoria over. Mason caught her, pulled her close, and together they fought their way around the cabin to the woodpile. They worked fast, loading their arms with as much as they could carry. The cold was vicious, attacking exposed skin, and Mason's earlier frostbite warning tingled on his fingers. But Victoria kept pace, didn't complain, just grabbed wood and held on. They were heading back when Victoria slipped. One moment she was beside him, the next she was falling, and the rope jerked tight around Mason's waist. He grabbed for her, caught her arm, pulled her back up. She was covered in snow, gasping, but uninjured. You okay? He had to shout over the wind. Yeah, just my boot caught on something. She clutched the wood tighter. Let's go. They made it back inside, dumped the wood, slammed the door. Both of them stood there breathing hard, snow melting off their clothes in puddles. That was fun, Victoria managed. Your definition of fun needs work. Mason brushed snow out of her hair. You sure you're okay? Fine, just clumsy. She pulled off her gloves and Mason saw her hands were shaking. Not from cold, from adrenaline, from fear. That was closer than I want to admit. But you didn't panic. I was too busy being terrified to panic. She laughed shakily. Is it always like this up here? Only during apocalyptic blizzards. Mason guided her toward the fire. You did good. I fell. You got back up. That's what matters. He handed her a blanket. Warm up. I'll make more coffee. They settled by the fire again, and Caleb woke briefly to drink more water before falling back asleep. His fever seemed to be holding steady, not worse, but not better. Mason tried not to think about what would happen if it got worse, if they couldn't get him to a hospital. One problem at a time. Tell me about your company, he said, changing the subject. What exactly does NeuroVault do? We build AI systems for data analysis and predictive modeling. Basically, we help companies process massive amounts of information and make better decisions. Victoria wrapped her hands around her mug. Our main product is a neural network that can analyze market trends faster than any human team. That sounds complicated. It is, but also kind of beautiful in a weird way, like watching a brain figure itself out. She stared into her coffee. I loved it once. The elegance of the code, the possibilities. Now it's just numbers on a spreadsheet. What changed? I did. The company got big enough that I wasn't building anymore. I was managing, politicking, playing games with people who saw me as either a threat or an opportunity. She set down her mug. Do you know what the worst part is? I'm good at it. Really good. I can walk into a room full of sharks and come out with everything I want. But it doesn't make me happy. It just makes me successful. So stop. And do what? Throw away everything I built? Maybe build something else. Something that actually makes you happy. Mason leaned back. You're 30 years old. You've got decades ahead of you. Why spend them being miserable? Because I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Victoria's voice cracked. This is who I am, Victoria Hayes, CEO. Without that, I'm just nothing. That's not true, isn't it? What do I have outside the company? No family, no real friends, no hobbies, no passions, no life. Just work. She looked at him. At least you have Caleb, someone who loves you for who you are, not what you've accomplished. I don't have that. I don't have anyone. Mason reached over and took her hand. You have someone right now. She stared at their joined hands. For how long? Until the storm ends and we go back to our real lives? Maybe. Or maybe longer. I don't know. He squeezed gently. But right now, in this moment, you're not alone, and that counts for something. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why are you being so kind to me? Because you need it. Because I needed it too, and didn't realize until you showed up. Mason pulled her closer. And because I haven't felt this connected to another human being since Sarah died. That scares me, but it also feels right. It scares me too. She leaned against him. I don't do connection. I don't do vulnerability. This is all completely foreign. Then we'll figure it out together. They sat in silence while the fire burned and the storm raged and Caleb slept, and slowly the walls both of them had built started showing cracks. Not breaking completely, that would take time, maybe more time than they had, but weakening enough to let something through, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The afternoon dragged on with the kind of slowness that made every minute feel like an hour. Mason had lost track of time completely. The storm had turned day into a perpetual gray twilight, and his phone remained dead weight in his pocket. Could have been 2 in the afternoon. Could have been 5. Didn't matter much either way. What mattered was that Caleb's fever had climbed. Mason pressed his hand to his son's forehead again, felt the heat radiating off him, and tried to keep the panic from showing on his face. The Tylenol wasn't working anymore. Or maybe it was working, and this was just how bad things were going to get. Either way, Caleb had stopped talking much, just lay there with his eyes half closed, occasionally coughing in a way that sounded wet and wrong. How is he? Victoria stood behind Mason, her voice tight with worry. Not great. Mason soaked a rag in cold water, melted snow from outside, and pressed it to Caleb's forehead. Fever's climbing. I don't like the sound of that cough. Could it be pneumonia? Could be a lot of things. Hard to tell without a doctor. Mason wrung out the rag, applied it again. We need to get out of here, get him to a hospital. And this? Victoria gestured toward the window where snow still fell in thick sheets. We'd die before we made it 100 yards. I know. That was the hell of it, knowing exactly what Caleb needed and being completely unable to provide it. But if we wait too long, we're not waiting too long. The storm has to break eventually. Victoria sat on the other side of the cot, smoothed Caleb's hair back from his forehead. Right, Caleb? You just need to hang in there a little longer. Caleb's eyes fluttered open. I don't feel good. I know, buddy. I'm sorry. Mason tried to smile. But you're tough. Tougher than this stupid cold. Is it just a cold? The question cut deeper than it should have. Kids weren't supposed to ask things like that, weren't supposed to understand when adults were scared and lying about it. But Caleb had been through too much already. He'd watched his mother waste away, had seen Mason fall apart afterward, had learned too young that the world wasn't safe and people you loved could disappear. Yeah, Mason lied. Just a cold. You'll be fine. Caleb didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway and closed his eyes again. Victoria met Mason's gaze over the cot, and he saw his own fear reflected back at him. We should keep him hydrated, she said quietly. I read somewhere that's the most important thing with fevers. Yeah, good idea. Mason grabbed a water bottle, helped Caleb sit up enough to drink. The boy managed a few sips before pushing it away, and Mason didn't force it. You need anything else? Food? More blankets? Just want to sleep. Okay, sleep then. Mason tucked the blankets tighter around him. We'll be right here. They moved back to the fire, both of them silent. Mason fed more wood into the flames, even though their supply was getting dangerously low. Tomorrow, they'd run out completely, maybe sooner. But what good was saving wood if Caleb got worse? He's going to be okay, Victoria said it like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. You don't know that. Neither do you. But I'm choosing to believe it anyway. She threw his own words back at him. Sometimes that's all you can do, right? Choose to believe things get better? Mason almost smiled. Using my own logic against me. That's cold. Desperate times. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders. Tell me what to do. How can I help? You're doing it. Being here. Mason stared at the fire. I've been alone with this for 3 years, making every decision, handling every crisis, never having backup. So just stay. That helps more than you know. I'm not going anywhere. Victoria shifted closer, not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her presence. Even if I wanted to, my car's at the bottom of a ravine somewhere. Right, sorry. I forgot you're only here because of automotive failure. That's not what I meant. She bumped his shoulder. I'm glad I'm here. I mean, not glad about the circumstances. The storm, Caleb being sick, possibly freezing to death, but glad I'm here with you. Even though I keep lying about things being fine, especially because of that, at least you're honest about being dishonest. Victoria pulled her knees up. Most people in my life lie and pretend they're not. You lie, and we both know it, which somehow feels more real. That's twisted logic. Welcome to my brain. Everything's twisted. She rested her chin on her knees. Can I ask you something personal? Haven't we crossed that bridge already? This is different. Victoria hesitated. When Sarah died, how did you know when to stop fighting? When to just let go? The question landed like a punch. Mason took a breath, let it out slowly. You never stop fighting. That's not how it works. But you said she died in your arms, that you were there. Yeah, I was there. The memory was sharp even 3 years later. The hospital room, the machines, Sarah's hand in his growing cold. But I didn't stop fighting. The doctors did. They said there was nothing more they could do, and His voice cracked. I screamed at them, told them to keep trying, to do something, anything. Made such a scene they almost had security remove me. What stopped you? Sarah did. She was barely conscious, but she looked at me and said, "Let me go." Just like that, like it was simple. Mason's hands tightened around his mug, and I couldn't do it. I begged her to keep fighting, told her Caleb needed her, I needed her, but she just smiled and said, "You'll be okay, both of you." Then she closed her eyes and he couldn't finish, didn't need to. Victoria reached over and took his hand, laced her fingers through his. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Me too." Mason squeezed her hand. "Why are you asking?" "Because I'm trying to understand what love actually looks like. Real love, not the sanitized version in movies." Victoria stared at their joined hands. "You loved her enough to let her go. I can't imagine that kind of strength." "It wasn't strength. It was the opposite. I was weak and selfish, and I wanted to hold on forever." Mason turned to look at her. "But sometimes love means doing the thing that destroys you, because it's what they need, even when it feels impossible." "That's terrifying." "Yeah, it is." He studied her face, the worry lines between her eyebrows, the exhaustion in her eyes, the vulnerability she usually hid so well. "Is that why you don't let people close? Because you're afraid of that kind of loss?" "Partly. Also because I don't trust myself not to screw it up." Victoria pulled her hand back, wrapped both arms around herself. "I told you about Daniel. What I didn't tell you is that he proposed 2 weeks before I chose a board meeting over his graduation." "Did you say yes?" "I said I needed time to think about it, which was code for no, but I was too much of a coward to actually say it." She laughed bitterly. "He knew. Of course he knew. But he waited anyway, hoping I'd choose him. And when I didn't, when I chose the company for the 1,000th time, he finally had enough." "Do you regret it?" "Every single day. But I'd probably make the same choice again, which makes it worse." Victoria met his eyes. "That's who I am, Mason. Someone who destroys good things because I'm too broken to appreciate them while I have them. So yeah, I don't let people close. It's kinder that way." "Kinder to who?" "To them. To everyone." She stood abruptly, moved to the window. "I should check on Caleb." Mason recognized deflection when he saw it. Had used it enough himself. But he let her go. Victoria crossed to the cot, felt Caleb's forehead, adjusted his blankets. She moved like someone who'd never done this before but was trying hard to get it right. And something about that awkward care made Mason's chest ache. "His fever's still high," Victoria called over her shoulder. "I know. Not much we can do except wait." Mason joined her, looked down at his son's flushed face. "He's strong. He'll fight through this." "He gets that from you." "From Sarah, actually. She was the strong one." Mason brushed Caleb's hair back. "I'm just faking it." "Could have fooled me." Victoria's shoulder pressed against his. "You've kept us alive this long. That takes strength. Or stupidity. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." They stood there watching Caleb sleep, and Mason became acutely aware of how close Victoria was standing. Close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body, smell that expensive shampoo again. close enough that if he turned his head just slightly, their faces would be inches apart. He didn't turn his head, didn't move at all. Just stood there, fighting the completely inappropriate urge to kiss a woman he'd met less than 24 hours ago while his son lay sick and a blizzard tried to kill them all. What the hell was wrong with him? I should make dinner, he said, stepping back. We've got some soup in the bag, canned stuff, but it's something. I'll help. Victoria followed him to the small kitchen area. What do you need? Can opener, pot, and low expectations. Mason rummaged through their supplies. We're down to 2 cans of soup, 3 granola bars, and some beef jerky that might be older than Caleb. Sounds delicious. Yeah, well, 5-star dining will have to wait. He found the can opener, started working on the soup. How are you with a campfire stove? I've used a Viking range exactly twice. Does that count? Not even a little. Mason couldn't help smiling. Just keep an eye on this pot. If it starts boiling over, move it away from the heat. I can handle that, probably. Victoria took over stirring while Mason added snow to melt for water. This is weird, right? Domestic life in an apocalypse cabin? Definitely weird. Mason watched her stir with intense concentration, like she was performing surgery. You really never learned to cook? Why would I? I can afford personal chefs, meal delivery, restaurants that would kill for my business. She glanced at him. But also no, my mother wasn't exactly the teaching type. After my father left, we lived on frozen dinners and takeout. What about before he left? Before? Victoria's stirring slowed. Before, we had family dinners every night. My father would cook. He was actually good at it. Italian food mostly. We'd sit together and talk about our days, and sometimes he'd let me help with the pasta. Her voice went distant. I loved those dinners. Thought we'd have them forever. How old were you when he left? 12. Old enough to understand he was choosing to go, young enough to think it was somehow my fault. She kept stirring, mechanical now. My mother said he met someone else. Younger, prettier, less complicated. Started a whole new family and forgot about us completely. That's not your fault. I know that now. Didn't know it then. Victoria tasted the soup, made a face. This needs salt. Probably needs a lot of things. Salt's in that box over there. Mason pointed, then grabbed bowls from the shelf. Did you ever see him again? Your father? Once. I was 23, just closed my first major funding round for Neurovault. He showed up at my office wanting to congratulate me. Her laugh was sharp. Took me about 30 seconds to realize he wanted money. He'd blown through everything with his new family, needed a bailout, figured his successful daughter would help. What did you do? Had security escort him out. Haven't seen him since. Victoria added salt to the soup, stirred again. My assistant asked if I wanted to put him on a permanent ban list. I said no. Let him come back if he wants. I'll just have him thrown out again. Seemed more satisfying. That's cold. I learned from the best. She ladled soup into bowls. My father taught me that people leave, that love is conditional, that you can't trust anyone except yourself. So I built a life around those lessons. And you're miserable. Completely. Victoria handed him a bowl. But at least nobody can hurt me anymore. Except yourself. Mason took the bowl. You're doing a pretty good job of that. Yeah, well, I'm an overachiever. She filled another bowl for Caleb. Should we wake him? He needs to eat. They managed to get Caleb to sit up and swallow a few spoonfuls of soup before he pushed it away and asked to sleep again. His fever hadn't broken, but it hadn't climbed higher either. Mason told himself that was good enough for now. The evening crept forward. They ate in silence, cleaned up in silence, fed the fire in silence. The storm outside had finally started to ease, not stopping, but losing some of its fury. Mason could see farther than 5 feet now, could make out the shapes of trees through the window. It's getting better, Victoria said, following his gaze. Yeah, maybe by morning we can make a run for it. Mason checked their wood supply. 3 logs left. 4, if he was generous. We'll need to leave early, before the roads get worse. If there are roads, could be buried under 6 feet of snow by now. Then we walk, whatever it takes. Mason sat by the fire, and Victoria settled beside him. Close again. Always close now, like the cabin had shrunk around them. How far do you think we are from civilization? My GPS said 12 miles to the nearest town before it died. But that was on roads. Straight line? Maybe 8 or 9. Victoria pulled the blanket around both of them. Think we can make it? With Caleb sick? I don't know. The honesty hurt. But staying here isn't an option. We're almost out of supplies. The cabin's barely warmer than outside, and if his fever gets worse, so we go. First light. Victoria's jaw set with determination. I'll carry him if I have to. You're not built for hiking through snow. Neither are you. Your knee's been bothering you since yesterday. Don't think I haven't noticed the limp. She met his eyes. We'll figure it out together, like everything else. Together. The word settled between them, heavier than it should be. They'd known each other barely a day, but it felt longer. Felt like she'd always been there, this sharp-edged woman with her walls and her fears and her terrible coffee-stirring skills. Can I tell you something? Mason's voice was quiet. I haven't felt like myself in 3 years. Like the real me died with Sarah, and I've just been some hollow version going through the motions. But today, talking to you, being with you, I feel like maybe there's still someone real in here. He touched his chest. Does that make sense? Yeah. Victoria's eyes were bright in the firelight. It makes sense because I feel it too. Like maybe I'm not just Victoria Hayes, CEO. Maybe I'm still just Victoria somewhere underneath all the corporate armor. You are. I've seen her. Have you? Or are you just seeing who you want me to be? I'm seeing who you actually are when you stop performing. Mason reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear without thinking. The woman who helped make terrible coffee, who told Caleb a sad story because it was honest, who went into a blizzard to get firewood even though she was terrified. That's the real you. Victoria's breath caught. Mason. I know. This is crazy. We barely know each other. You live in a penthouse in Chicago. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment that smells like old pizza. You're a billionaire. I'm a furnace repair guy. This doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. Victoria's voice shook slightly. But I can't stop thinking about what happens when we leave here, when we go back to real life and this becomes just a weird story we tell at parties. Is that what you want? For this to be just a story? No. The word came out barely above a whisper. But I don't know how to want anything else. I don't know how to be with someone without destroying it. Maybe you don't have to know. Maybe you just try. Mason's hand was still near her face, and she leaned into it slightly. I'm terrified, too. Haven't been with anyone since Sarah died. Don't know if I even remember how. But I want to try. With you. Why me? I'm a disaster. So am I. Maybe we can be disasters together. He smiled. Better than being disasters alone. Victoria laughed, shaky and uncertain. That's the worst sales pitch I've ever heard. Yeah, well, I'm out of practice. Mason's thumb brushed her cheek. But I mean it. I want to see where this goes, even if it crashes and burns. Even if it only lasts until the storm ends, I want to try. Mason, Victoria started, but whatever she was going to say got cut off by Caleb coughing. Hard, racking coughs that sounded like they were tearing him apart. They both scrambled to the cot. Caleb was sitting up, struggling to breathe between coughs, and Mason's heart stopped. This was bad. This was pneumonia or bronchitis or something else he couldn't treat with a first aid kit. Caleb, look at me. Mason grabbed his shoulders. Slow breaths, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Caleb tried, failed, coughed harder. His face was red, eyes watering, and panic was setting in. He can't breathe. Victoria's voice was sharp with fear. I know. Mason's mind raced. Steam. They needed steam to open his airways. Get water boiling, as much as we have. Victoria didn't question it, just grabbed the pot and started melting snow over the fire. Mason held Caleb, talking him through it, trying to keep him calm even though his own panic was threatening to take over. You're okay. You're okay. Just breathe with me. In, out, in, out. Slowly, painfully, the coughing eased. Caleb sucked in a shaky breath, then another, and Mason felt some of the terror loosen in his chest. That's it. Good job, buddy. Mason kept his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. Just keep breathing. Dad! Caleb's voice was barely audible. Am I dying? The question destroyed him. No, you're not dying. I promise. You said that to Mom, too. Mason froze. In 3 years, Caleb had never brought that up. Never mentioned the hospital, the lies Mason had told, the promises he couldn't keep. And now, here, trapped in a cabin while his son fought to breathe. I know, Mason said quietly. I know I did. And I was wrong then. But I'm not wrong now. You're going to be okay. How do you know? Because I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Whatever it takes, I'm getting you out of here. Mason pulled him close. That's a promise I can keep. Victoria had the water boiling. She brought it over, and they rigged a makeshift steam tent with blankets, getting Caleb to breathe in the moisture. It helped. Not enough, but enough that he stopped struggling quite so hard. We need to go now, Victoria said quietly. We can't wait until morning. It's dark. The storm is dying down. And if we wait, he might not make it. She met Mason's eyes. You know I'm right. He did. Hated it, but knew it. Okay, we go now. Help me pack. They worked fast, gathering everything they might need. Mason wrapped Caleb in every blanket they had, then lifted him. The boy felt lighter than he should, and that scared Mason more than anything else. I'll carry the bags, Victoria said. You focus on him. You sure you can? I said I'll carry them. Her voice left no room for argument. Let's go. Mason shouldered the door open. The storm had calmed to light snowfall, and the moon was trying to break through the clouds. Visibility was better, maybe 50 feet. Not great, but enough to navigate by. Which way? Victoria stood beside him, loaded down with their bags. Down the mountain. Follow the road if we can find it. Mason adjusted his grip on Caleb. Stay close. If you feel like you're losing me, yell. Got it. They stepped into the snow and started walking. The cold hit immediately, worse than before because they'd gotten used to the cabin's meager warmth. Mason's knees screamed with every step, and Caleb's weight, light as it was, made his back ache. But he kept moving because stopping meant dying. Victoria struggled behind him. He could hear her breathing hard, knew the bags were killing her shoulders. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop, just kept walking. The snow was deep, past their knees in places. Every step required effort, and progress was measured in feet instead of miles. Mason's arms burned from carrying Caleb. Sweat froze on his face, his lungs ached from the cold air. Mason, Victoria's voice came from behind him. I need to stop, just for a minute. We can't, please, I can't feel my hands. He stopped. Victoria dropped the bags and stood there breathing hard, her face pale in the moonlight. She was shaking, whether from cold or exhaustion, Mason couldn't tell. Let me take one of the bags, he said. You're already carrying Caleb. And you're about to collapse. Give me one. He shifted Caleb carefully, managed to get one bag strap over his shoulder. Better? A little. Victoria picked up the other bag. How far have we gone? Mason looked back. The cabin was still visible through the trees. Maybe a quarter mile. That's it? The despair in her voice was crushing. We'll never make it. Yes, we will. Mason forced confidence into his voice. We just need to keep moving, one step at a time. I'm not built for this. I do yoga twice a week and that's it. I can't. You can. You're stronger than you think. Mason met her eyes. Remember what you said? We figure it out together. So let's figure this out. Victoria took a shaky breath, nodded. Together. Together. They started walking again. Time stopped meaning anything. Mason had no idea how long they'd been walking. Could have been an hour. Could have been 3. The world had narrowed to just snow and darkness and the burning agony in his arms from carrying Caleb. His knee had progressed past pain into numbness, which was somehow worse. He couldn't tell if he was damaging it permanently or if the cold had just killed the nerves. Behind him, Victoria stumbled. Not her first time. She'd fallen twice already, gotten back up without complaint both times. But this stumble was different, slower, like her body was giving up. Talk to me, Mason said without stopping. Keep yourself awake. About what? Her voice was slurred with exhaustion. Anything. Tell me about your first business deal. My first? Victoria laughed, bitter and breathless. You want to hear about business right now? I want to hear you talking. So yeah, business. Whatever keeps you moving. She was quiet for a moment, just the sound of crunching snow. Then, I was 22, still in grad school, Had this idea for a data compression algorithm that could reduce file sizes by 60% without quality loss. That sounds complicated. It was. Took me 8 months to develop, another 4 to perfect. Then I needed funding to build it into actual software. Victoria's breathing was ragged. Pitched to 47 investors. Got rejected by all of them. Too young, too inexperienced, too ambitious. One guy literally laughed me out of his office. What did you do? Pitched to number 48, this old venture capitalist named Richard Chen. He listened to my whole presentation, didn't say a word. Then, when I finished, he asked one question. Why should I believe you can do this when you've never done anything before? Victoria paused to catch her breath. And I told him, because everyone said it was impossible, and I did it anyway. Imagine what I'll do when people actually believe in me. Did it work? He wrote me a check for $2 million right there. Pride crept into her voice despite the exhaustion. Said he'd seen a lot of pitches, but he'd never seen someone that hungry. That determined. So you built the company. Built it from nothing. Slept 4 hours a night for 3 years. Lived on ramen and coffee. Missed birthdays, holidays, every social event anyone invited me to. She stumbled again, caught herself. By the time I was 25, we'd gone public. By 27, I was a billionaire. By 30, I was completely alone. You're not alone now. No, I'm dying in a snowstorm with a stranger and his sick kid. Much better. But there was no bite to it, just exhaustion. Mason wanted to respond, but Caleb stirred in his arms, coughed weakly. The sound tore at Mason's heart. His son felt lighter somehow, like he was fading, and the thought sent panic racing through Mason's veins. Hold on, buddy, he whispered. Just a little longer. Where are we going? Caleb's voice was barely audible. To get help, to a hospital. Am I going to die? No. Mason tightened his grip. You're not. I won't let you. You can't stop it if it happens. The words hit like a physical blow. When had his 10-year-old learned that kind of truth? When had the world taken his innocence and replaced it with this terrible understanding? Maybe not, Mason said quietly, but I can fight like hell to keep it from happening, and that's what I'm doing. Caleb went quiet again, and Mason kept walking. His arms screamed. His back felt like it was breaking. His knee gave out twice, and both times he caught himself before falling, refusing to drop his son. Mason? Victoria's voice came from farther back than before. I need to stop. We can't. I'm going to collapse if I don't. She sounded on the verge of tears. Please. Just 2 minutes. He stopped, turned. Victoria had fallen behind by at least 20 feet. She stood bent over, hands on her knees, breathing so hard it sounded painful. Her designer coat was torn, her expensive boots were probably ruined, and her face was ghost white in the moonlight. She looked nothing like the untouchable CEO from magazine covers. She looked human, fragile, terrified. Mason walked back to her. Sit down, just for a minute. If I sit, I won't get back up. But she sat anyway, collapsing into the snow. I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. You've made it this far. Because you were pulling me along, but I can't. Her voice broke. I'm going to slow you down. You should leave me here. Take Caleb and go. Are you out of your mind? I'm being practical. He needs a hospital. You can move faster without me. Victoria looked up at him. It makes sense. No, absolutely not. Mason sat beside her, carefully adjusting Caleb in his arms. We're staying together. That's not negotiable. Even if it means Caleb doesn't make it? The question was a knife to the chest. He's going to make it, and so are you. We just need to rest for a minute, catch our breath, then keep going. You're delusional. Probably, but I'm not leaving you here to freeze to death. Mason met her eyes. I told you we'd figure this out together. I meant it. Victoria stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Why? Why do you care what happens to me? Because you're Victoria, and despite everything, the money, the walls, the fear, you're worth caring about. He shifted Caleb to one arm, used the other to pull her closer. So we're resting for exactly 2 minutes. Then we're getting up and walking, together. She leaned against him, shaking from cold and exhaustion. I really hate that you're this stubborn. Yeah, well, it's one of my better qualities. Mason checked his watch, cracked face, but still running. 2 minutes starting now. They sat in the snow while the wind picked up slightly and the temperature continued dropping. Caleb's breathing was shallow, concerning. Victoria's shaking wouldn't stop, and Mason's own body felt like it was shutting down piece by piece. But they were still alive, still fighting. That had to count for something. "Tell me about Chicago," Victoria said quietly. "Your apartment, what's it like?" "Small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen barely big enough to turn around in." Mason smiled despite everything. "Caleb's room has posters everywhere. Superheroes, space stuff, a map of Middle Earth he made me hang above his bed. My room's mostly boxes I still haven't unpacked from when we moved there after Sarah died." 3 years and you haven't unpacked? Didn't see the point. It's just a place to sleep, not really home. He looked at Caleb. Home was wherever Sarah was. Without her, it's just walls and furniture. That's sad. That's life. Mason checked his watch again. 1 minute left. What about your penthouse? What's that like? Empty. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, $1,000,000 view of the city. Custom furniture, original art on the walls, kitchen that costs more than most people's houses. Victoria's voice was flat. I hate it. Every inch of it. It's like living in a museum. So why stay? Because leaving would mean admitting I built the wrong life, and I'm not ready to admit that yet. She pulled away slightly. Time's up, isn't it? Mason glanced at his watch. Yeah. Time to move. Getting Victoria back on her feet took effort. Her legs didn't want to cooperate, and Mason had to help her up while still holding Caleb. But she managed, grabbed the bag again, and they started walking. The landscape was unchanging, just snow and trees and darkness. Mason tried to follow what he thought was the road, but everything looked the same. They could be walking in circles for all he knew, could be heading deeper into the mountains instead of toward civilization. But stopping meant dying, so he kept moving. I see something, Victoria said suddenly. Mason squinted ahead. There. A light. Faint, distant, but definitely a light. Could be a house. Or another hallucination. I've been seeing things for the last 20 minutes that I know aren't real. But hope had crept into her voice. Should we go toward it? What choice do we have? Mason adjusted his grip on Caleb and changed direction, heading for the light. It took another 15 minutes to reach it, 15 minutes that felt like hours. But the light grew closer, brighter, and Mason realized it wasn't a house. It was a gas station, small, probably family-owned, but it had lights, and that meant people and help. We made it, Victoria breathed. We actually made it. Don't celebrate yet. But relief flooded through Mason anyway. They'd made it. Against everything, they'd actually made it. The gas station door was locked. Mason pounded on it, yelling, Hello! Anyone here? We need help! A light came on inside. A moment later, the door opened to reveal an old man in a flannel shirt, eyes wide with shock. What in the... Please, my son's sick. We need to get to a hospital. Mason's voice cracked. Please help us. The old man took in the scene, Mason holding Caleb, Victoria barely standing, both of them covered in snow and ice. Come inside. Quick! They stumbled through the door into blessed warmth. Mason's legs nearly gave out, and the old man helped him to a chair while Victoria collapsed against the counter. Bob, the old man yelled toward the back. Call 911. We got people here freezing to death. Another man appeared, younger, grabbed a phone. Mason tried to explain what happened, but the words came out jumbled. Something about a storm, and a cabin, and walking, for hours. The old man just nodded, wrapped blankets around them, turned up the heat. Ambulance is coming, the younger man, Bob, said. 20 minutes out. Storm's got everything backed up. 20 minutes. Mason looked down at Caleb, felt his forehead, still burning. Can you hurry them? Already told them it's a kid. They're coming as fast as they can. Bob grabbed bottles of water, handed them over. What were you thinking, being out in that storm? Wasn't planning on it. Mason helped Caleb drink. Truck broke down. We were just trying to survive. The old man studied Victoria. Ain't you that tech lady? From the TV? Victoria looked up, exhausted. Yeah, that's me. What the hell are you doing in the mountains? Poor life choices. She managed a weak smile. Lots of them. The next 20 minutes crawled. Mason held Caleb, watched him breathe, counted every rise and fall of his chest. Victoria sat beside them, her hand on Mason's shoulder, and neither of them spoke. What was there to say? They'd made it. They'd survived. Everything else could wait. When the ambulance finally arrived, paramedics swarmed in. They took Caleb from Mason's arms. He didn't want to let go, had to force himself, and started checking vitals, asking questions. Pneumonia, they thought. Needed chest x-rays, IV antibiotics, hospitalization. "You did good getting him here," one paramedic said. "Another few hours in the cold." He didn't finish, didn't need to. They loaded Caleb into the ambulance. Mason climbed in after him, then turned back. Victoria stood in the gas station doorway, wrapped in a blanket, watching. "Come on," Mason said. "You're coming too." "I'm fine, just tired." "You're hypothermic. Get in the ambulance." When she hesitated, he added, "Please, I need you there." Something in his voice must have convinced her. Victoria climbed in, sat across from Mason, and the paramedics started checking her too. Mild hypothermia, they said, frostbite on her fingers, dehydration. But she'd be okay. The ambulance pulled away from the gas station, sirens wailing, and Mason finally let himself believe it. They were going to be okay. All of them. They'd actually made it. He looked at Victoria, found her watching him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? Almost getting you killed?" "For staying, for not giving up." Mason reached across and took her hand. "For being there." Victoria's fingers wrapped around his. "You too." The hospital was chaos. Nurses, doctors, bright lights, too many questions. They took Caleb away for tests and treatment, leaving Mason in a waiting room with generic chairs and fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly. Victoria sat beside him, still in her torn coat, still looking like she'd walked through hell, which, technically, she had. "They'll take care of him," she said. "He's going to be fine." "You don't know that." "I'm choosing to believe it." She squeezed his hand. "Remember? Sometimes that's all you can do." Mason wanted to respond, but a doctor appeared, young, competent-looking, carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Reed." Mason stood. "That's me." "How is he?" "Caleb has bacterial pneumonia. We've started him on IV antibiotics and fluids. His fever's already starting to come down." The doctor smiled. "He's going to be okay. We'll keep him for a few days to make sure, but he should make a full recovery." The relief hit so hard Mason had to sit back down. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "You can see him in about 20 minutes. We're getting him settled in a room." The doctor glanced at Victoria. "And you need to be checked out too. Frostbite can cause permanent damage if not treated quickly." "I'm fine." "That's not optional. Come with me." The doctor's tone left no room for argument. Victoria looked at Mason. "Will you be I'll be here." "Go get checked out?" Mason managed a smile. "Doctor's orders." She followed reluctantly, and Mason was left alone in the waiting room. He sat there, still in his snow-soaked clothes, still shaking from cold and adrenaline, and let himself fall apart. Just for a minute. Just long enough to acknowledge how terrified he'd been, how close they'd come to losing everything. Then he pulled himself together because that's what he did. That's what Sarah had taught him. Fall apart in private, then get up and keep going. 20 minutes later, a nurse led him to Caleb's room. His son was in a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV, but his color looked better. His breathing sounded clearer. He opened his eyes when Mason walked in. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, buddy." Mason pulled a chair close, took Caleb's hand. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Sore." Caleb's voice was stronger than it had been in hours. "The doctor said I have pneumonia." "Yeah, but they're treating it. You're going to be fine." I was really scared. "Me too." Mason squeezed his hand. "But we made it. You were so brave, Caleb, so strong." "Is Victoria okay?" The question surprised him. "Yeah, she's getting checked out by doctors, but she's okay." "Good. I like her." Caleb's eyes started closing. "She told good stories, even when they were sad." "Yeah, she did." Mason brushed Caleb's hair back. "Get some sleep. I'll be right here." "Promise?" "Promise." Caleb fell asleep within minutes, and Mason sat there watching him breathe, counting every breath like a prayer. He stayed like that for an hour, maybe more, until Victoria appeared in the doorway. She'd changed clothes, someone had given her scrubs, and her hands were bandaged, but she looked better, more alive. "Hey," she said quietly. "How is he?" "Sleeping, stable." Mason stood. What about you? Frostbite on 3 fingers. They said it should heal without permanent damage, if I'm careful. Victoria moved into the room, looked down at Caleb. He looks better. He is better, thanks to you. Mason stepped closer. I meant what I said earlier. Thank you for everything. I didn't do anything except complain and almost die. You kept going, even when you wanted to quit. That's everything. Mason reached up, touched her face gently. You saved us as much as we saved you. Victoria leaned into his touch. I don't know what happens now. We survived, and I don't know what to do with that. Neither do I. Mason's thumb brushed her cheek. But maybe we don't have to figure it out right now. Maybe we just see what happens. That's terrifying. Yeah, but most good things are. He smiled. You taught me that. Victoria laughed softly. I taught you nothing except how not to stir soup, and how to be honest about being broken, and how to keep fighting when everything says to quit, and how to... Mason stopped, the words catching in his throat. How to what? How to feel something again. Something real. He pulled her closer. I thought that part of me died with Sarah, but then you showed up in a blizzard and proved me wrong. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Mason, I'm going to screw this up. I screw everything up. It's what I do. So screw it up. I'll probably screw it up too. We'll figure it out together. He leaned his forehead against hers. I'm tired of being alone, Victoria. Tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not. Tired of going through the motions of a life I don't recognize. And I think you are too. I am, she whispered. I'm so tired. Then let's try something different. Let's try being honest and messy and imperfect together. See where it goes. What if it doesn't go anywhere? Then at least we tried. At least we took the chance. Mason pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I'm not asking for forever. I'm just asking for right now. Can you do that? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, then, yes, I can do that. Mason kissed her. Soft, careful, testing. She kissed him back, her bandaged hands coming up to frame his face, and something that had been broken inside him for 3 years started to feel like maybe it could heal. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. Really smiling, not the corporate smile she wore for cameras. So what now? Now we stay with Caleb until he's better. Then we figure out the rest. Mason glanced at his son, still sleeping peacefully. One step at a time. I can do that. Victoria laced her fingers through his. One step at a time. They sat together in the hospital room while machines beeped softly and nurses passed in the hallway and the world outside continued turning. And for the first time in years, Mason felt something other than grief and exhaustion. He felt hope. Fragile and uncertain, but real. Victoria squeezed his hand. Hey, Mason. Yeah? I'm glad my car crashed. He laughed quietly. That's the weirdest thing anyone's ever said to me. I mean it. If it hadn't, I'd still be driving to Denver, still chasing deals I don't care about, still pretending my life is fine when it's killing me. She looked at him. But instead I'm here, with you. And I can't remember the last time anything felt this right. Even though we almost died? Especially because of that. Victoria smiled. Nothing like a near-death experience to clarify what matters. And what matters? This, you, Caleb, being honest about being a mess instead of pretending to be perfect. She rested her head on his shoulder. Maybe that woman in the tower can build a door after all. Mason wrapped his arm around her. Maybe she already did. They stayed like that while Caleb slept and the night wore on and the storm outside finally broke, leaving the world covered in fresh snow that looked almost beautiful in the moonlight. And somewhere in that quiet hospital room, 2 broken people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd found something worth keeping. Caleb stayed in the hospital for 4 days. 4 days of IV antibiotics, breathing treatments, and doctors checking vitals every few hours. 4 days of Mason sleeping in an uncomfortable chair beside his son's bed, refusing to leave even when nurses offered him a cot in another room. 4 days of watching Caleb slowly return to himself, color coming back to his face, energy creeping into his voice, that spark in his eyes that had been missing since Sarah died. Victoria came every day. She'd rented a room at a hotel nearby, Nothing fancy, she insisted, though Mason suspected her version of nothing fancy probably had marble bathrooms and thread counts higher than his credit score. But she showed up every morning with coffee that didn't taste like hospital waiting room sludge, and she stayed until evening, talking to Caleb about superheroes and space and whatever random topics 10-year-olds obsessed over. "Did you know," Caleb said on day 3, "that if you could fold a piece of paper 42 times, it would reach the moon?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That's mathematically impossible. You can't physically fold paper more than 7 or 8 times. But if you could, theoretically," Caleb grinned. "Pretty cool, right?" "Pretty cool," she agreed, and Mason watched them together. This brilliant, guarded woman who'd built an empire on being untouchable, now sitting on a hospital bed discussing hypothetical paper folding with his son, and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just survival anymore. Wasn't just two broken people clinging to each other in a crisis. This was real. Messy and uncertain and completely terrifying, but real. On the 4th day, the doctor cleared Caleb to go home. "Keep him on antibiotics for another week, make sure he rests, and bring him back if the fever returns. But he should be fine. Kids bounce back fast." Mason signed discharge papers, gathered their things, and realized he had no idea how to get back to Chicago. His truck was still somewhere on Black Ridge Mountain, probably buried under snow. His phone was dead. His wallet had survived, but his cards were waterlogged and barely readable. "I called a car service," Victoria said, appearing in the doorway like she'd read his mind. "They'll take us back to the city." "Us?" "I'm going to Chicago too. My assistant already rescheduled everything in Denver." She met his eyes. "Unless you don't want me to come." "No, I want you to." Mason grabbed the bag with Caleb's things. Are you sure? You could fly back, private jet, first class, whatever billionaires do." "I could, but I'd rather drive with you." Victoria helped Caleb into a wheelchair, hospital policy, even though he could walk fine. "Besides, we should probably talk about what happens next." "Yeah, we should." The car service turned out to be a black SUV with leather seats and a driver who didn't ask questions. Caleb fell asleep within 20 minutes, exhausted from 4 days of poking and prodding. Mason sat beside Victoria in the back, watching the mountains disappear behind them. "So," Victoria said quietly, "what happens next?" Mason had been asking himself the same question for 4 days. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" Honest answer, "I have no idea." She stared out the window. "I've never done this before. She gestured vaguely between them. "Whatever this is." "A relationship? Is that what this is?" Victoria turned to look at him. "We spent 2 days together in a cabin during a blizzard. People bond in crisis situations. Doesn't mean it translates to real life." "You think that's all this is? Crisis bonding?" "I think we don't know each other. Not really." She pulled at a thread on her bandaged fingers. "You know survival Victoria, mountain cabin Victoria, but you don't know boardroom Victoria. The one who fires people without blinking, who makes decisions that affect thousands of lives based on profit margins, who can be ruthless and cold and human," Mason interrupted. "You're human, Victoria. I know that. I've seen it." "Have you? Or did you just see what you wanted to see?" She looked away. "I'm not some damsel you rescued. I'm complicated and difficult, and I'll probably hurt you without meaning to. That's who I am." "I know." Mason reached over, took her unbandaged hand. "And I'm a widower who hasn't moved on, who's still unpacking boxes 3 years later, who feeds his kid frozen dinners and has panic attacks in people's basements. I'm a mess too." "So what are we doing?" "Trying." Mason squeezed her hand. "That's all we can do. Try and see what happens." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm scared." "Me too." "What if I screw this up?" "Then you screw it up, and we either fix it or we don't." Mason turned her face toward him gently. "But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." She leaned against him, and they sat like that while the miles rolled past and Caleb slept, and the driver pretended not to notice anything happening in the back seat. "My board's going to hate this," Victoria said eventually. "Dating a furnace repair guy. The press will have a field day. So don't tell them. Don't tell them I'm dating someone. They monitor my life like I'm a celebrity." They'll know. Then let them know. Mason shrugged. You're the CEO. You make the rules, remember? It's not that simple. It is that simple. You're just afraid to make it simple. He shifted to look at her properly. Here's the thing. You can keep living your life worried about what your board thinks, what investors think, what the press thinks, or you can decide that your happiness matters more than their opinions. Your choice. Easy for you to say. You don't have shareholders. No, but I had a wife who died because I was too busy working to notice she was sick. The words came out harsh, and Mason saw Victoria flinch. She complained about being tired for months, said her stomach hurt, and I told her she was probably just stressed, that she should rest more. Didn't push her to see a doctor because I was busy with work, busy with Caleb, busy with everything except paying attention. Mason, by the time she finally went to the doctor, it was stage 4. 8 months later, she was gone. Mason's voice cracked. So yeah, I know about priorities, about choosing work over the people you love, and I know what it costs. Victoria stared at him, her eyes bright. That's not your fault? Isn't it? If I'd paid attention. You can't know that, even if you'd caught it earlier. She stopped. You can't blame yourself for that. But I do. Every single day. Mason looked at Caleb, still sleeping peacefully. And I promised myself I wouldn't make that mistake again, that I'd pay attention to what matters, to who matters. And you think I matter? I know you do. Mason met her eyes. So if you want to keep working 18-hour days and missing life because your board expects it, that's your choice. But don't expect me to pretend it's okay, because I've seen where that road leads, and I won't watch someone else I care about disappear into work that doesn't even make them happy. Victoria pulled her hand back. That's not fair. No, it's not, but it's honest. Mason leaned back in his seat. I'm not asking you to quit your job or give up your company. I'm asking you to decide what kind of life you actually want. Because right now you're living a life that's killing you, and I can't watch that happen. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Caleb stirred, mumbled something in his sleep, and settled again. Outside, the landscape had shifted from mountains to flatlands, Chicago appearing on the horizon like a promise or a threat. I don't know how to do this, Victoria said finally. Balance work and life. Be successful and happy. Have relationships that don't implode. I've never learned how. Neither have I, but maybe we can figure it out together. Mason offered his hand. If you're willing to try. Victoria looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it. Okay, we try. That's all I'm asking. The rest of the drive passed in comfortable silence. They reached Chicago as evening settled over the city, lights beginning to glow in windows and street lamps flickering to life. The driver pulled up to Mason's apartment building, a worn brick structure in a neighborhood that had seen better decades, and Victoria stared at it like she'd never seen anything quite like it. This is it? She asked. This is it. Mason gathered their bags. Not much, but it's home, sort of. Can I come up? The question surprised him. You want to? I want to see where you live, where Caleb lives. Victoria helped wake Caleb gently. If that's okay. Yeah, of course. Mason's apartment was exactly as embarrassing as he'd remembered. Small, cluttered, boxes still stacked in corners with Sarah's things written in faded marker. Caleb went straight to his room and collapsed on his bed, still exhausted. Mason stood in the living room, suddenly seeing everything through Victoria's eyes. The furniture was mismatched. The paint was peeling in one corner. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person, let alone two. And those boxes, those damn boxes he couldn't bring himself to unpack or throw away, dominated half the living space. I know it's not much, Mason started. It's perfect, Victoria said quietly. She moved through the apartment slowly, taking everything in. Stopped at the photos on the wall, Mason and Sarah on their wedding day, Caleb as a baby, family photos from before. Is this her? Yeah, that's Sarah. Mason came to stand beside her. That was taken about 6 months before she got sick. We went to Michigan for Caleb's birthday, rented a cabin by the lake. She's beautiful. Yeah, she was. Mason touched the frame gently. I used to talk to these photos after she died. Caleb would be asleep and I'd just tell her about my day, ask her what to do, beg her to come back. He laughed bitterly. Pretty pathetic. It's not pathetic. It's love. Victoria turned to look at him. And it's okay that you still love her. I don't expect you to just forget. I won't forget, ever. Mason met her eyes. But I'm learning that loving someone who's gone doesn't mean I can't love someone who's here. Those things can both be true. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I'm ready for this. For someone to love me. Then we'll take it slow. Figure it out as we go. Mason pulled her close. No pressure, no expectations. Just see what happens. She wrapped her arms around him, buried her face in his shoulder. Why are you so patient with me? Because you're worth being patient for. He kissed the top of her head. And because I know what it's like to be broken and scared and trying to figure out how to be human again. They stood like that while the apartment settled around them and Chicago hummed outside the windows, and Caleb slept in his room, safe and healing. And slowly, Victoria's shaking stopped. I should go, she said eventually. Let you both rest. You could stay on the couch. If you want. Mason pulled back to look at her. No pressure, just, it's late and your hotel's across town. Are you sure? I'm sure. Victoria stayed. Mason gave her one of his old college t-shirts to sleep in. She looked ridiculous in it, drowning in fabric, and somehow that made her more beautiful. They said goodnight like awkward teenagers, and Mason went to his room, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel like he was sleeping in a mausoleum. He felt like maybe, possibly, he was coming back to life. Morning came with sunlight and the smell of coffee. Mason woke confused. He hadn't made coffee yet, and stumbled to the kitchen to find Victoria standing there, staring at his ancient coffee maker like it was alien technology. How does this work? She asked without preamble. Mason couldn't help laughing. You run a tech company worth billions and you can't work a coffee maker? I have people for this. Normally. She held up the filter basket. Does this go here or here? Here. Mason took it from her, showed her. Water in the back, grounds in the filter. Press this button. That's it? That's it. Victoria watched the coffee brew like it was performing magic. I really am useless at normal life, aren't I? Not useless, just inexperienced. Mason grabbed mugs. Want to learn? Learn what? How to be normal. How to make coffee and cook basic meals and do things that don't require an assistant or a board meeting. He poured coffee for both of them. I could teach you, if you want. In exchange for what? Nothing, just... Mason shrugged. You could teach me about your world, tech stuff, business strategies, whatever. We learn from each other. Victoria considered this. That's the strangest offer I've ever received. Is that a no? That's a yes. She smiled. I want to learn. I want to be... She gestured vaguely. Less of a disaster at everything that isn't work. Deal. They drank coffee while Caleb slept and talked about nothing important, weather, traffic, the news. Normal conversation between two people who were trying to figure out how to be normal together. It felt strange and natural all at once. Caleb emerged around 9, looking better but moving slowly. Is Victoria still here? I'm still here, Victoria waved from the couch. How are you feeling? Better. Still tired. Caleb flopped beside her. Are you my dad's girlfriend now? Mason nearly choked on his coffee. Caleb, what? I'm just asking. Caleb looked between them. You like each other, right? And you keep holding hands. That's what girlfriends and boyfriends do. Victoria's face had gone red. We're figuring it out, Mason said. Is that okay with you? Caleb thought about it seriously. Yeah, I like Victoria. She's cool. He looked at her. Are you going to live here now? No, I have my own place. Victoria's voice was gentle. But I'll visit, if that's okay with you. Can you visit a lot? I can try. Good. Caleb grabbed the remote. Dad, can I watch cartoons? Just like that, the conversation was over. Kids had a way of cutting through complexity to what mattered, and apparently what mattered to Caleb was cartoons and Victoria visiting. The rest was just details. Mason made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, nothing fancy. Victoria watched him cook like she was taking mental notes. They ate together at the small table, and it felt almost normal, almost like a family. I have to go back to work tomorrow, Victoria said as they cleaned up. Board meeting I can't miss, but She hesitated. Can I come back this weekend? Spend time with you and Caleb? Yeah, we'd like that. Mason dried the dishes she washed. But I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll actually take care of yourself, sleep, eat, not work yourself to death. He met her eyes. Because I meant what I said. I can't watch someone else disappear into work. Victoria set down the dish she was washing. I'll try. That's the best I can promise. That's good enough. She left after lunch, and the apartment felt emptier without her, but not as empty as it used to. Like maybe there was room now for other people, other possibilities. Mason cleaned up, checked on Caleb, and found himself actually looking forward to the weekend. The days passed slowly. Mason went back to work. Furnaces didn't fix themselves, and Caleb returned to school once his antibiotics were finished. Life resumed its normal rhythm, except now there were text messages from Victoria throughout the day. Nothing profound, just small things. Learned to make coffee without help today. It tasted terrible, but I did it. Or board meeting ran 4 hours. Pretty sure I fell asleep with my eyes open, and every message made Mason smile because it meant she was thinking about him, about them. Friday evening, Victoria showed up at his door with grocery bags and a determined expression. I'm making dinner. You can't cook. I can learn. You said you'd teach me. She pushed past him into the kitchen. So, teach me. Mason taught her to make spaghetti. Simple, hard to screw up, or so he thought. Victoria managed to burn the garlic, oversalt the sauce, and somehow turned the pasta into mush. But she laughed about it instead of getting frustrated, and they ordered pizza instead and called it a learning experience. Caleb loved every minute of it. He chattered through dinner about school and his friends and a science project on black holes. Victoria listened like everything he said was fascinating, asked questions, told him about quantum computing in ways a 10-year-old could understand. And Mason watched them and thought, this could work. This strange, imperfect thing between them could actually work. After Caleb went to bed, Mason and Victoria sat on his worn couch with the TV playing quietly in the background. I talked to my board today, Victoria said. Told them I'm cutting back my hours, delegating more, taking weekends off. How'd they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of concerned looks and questions about my commitment to the company. She leaned against him. But I held firm. Told them I'm redesigning my life, and they can either support it or find a new CEO. That's brave. That's terrifying, but also, she looked up at him. It feels right. For the first time in years, something feels right. Mason kissed her. Slow and gentle and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. I'm going to screw this up, she said. At some point, I'll work too late or miss something important or revert to old habits. You know that, right? Probably. And I'll probably pull back or get scared or compare you to Sarah without meaning to. Mason brushed her hair back. We're both going to screw up. That's part of trying. So we just keep trying? Yeah, we keep trying. He pulled her closer. And when we screw up, we talk about it, fix it, learn from it. That's how this works. I've never been in a relationship where that was okay. Messing up, I mean. Then this is new for both of us. Mason smiled. We'll figure it out together. They stayed like that until late, talking about everything and nothing. About her plans to restructure her company, his thoughts about maybe going back to school, Caleb's obsession with space. Normal conversation between two people building something real. When Victoria finally left, she still had her apartment, insisted on keeping it for now. Mason stood at the door watching her go. She turned back before getting in her car. Hey, Mason? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for crashing your car on my mountain. He grinned. Best worst thing that ever happened. She laughed, got in her car, and drove away. And Mason went back inside to his small apartment with its boxes and memories and possibilities and started unpacking. Sarah's boxes, the ones he'd been avoiding for 3 years. He opened them one by one, sorting through clothes and books and little mementos of a life that had ended too soon. Some things he kept. Photos, jewelry for Caleb someday, her favorite sweater that still somehow smelled like her. Other things he donated, let go, released back into the world. It took him all weekend. Victoria came back Saturday and helped, listening to stories about Sarah without jealousy or discomfort. Just listening acknowledging, making space for all of it, and somehow that made it easier. She would have liked you, Mason said as they packed the last box for donation. Sarah, she would have thought you were brilliant and stubborn and perfect for me. You think so? I know so. He stood, brushed off his jeans. She told me once that if anything happened to her, I should find someone who challenged me, who didn't let me get comfortable being miserable. He smiled. That's you. I'm honored. Victoria helped him carry boxes to his truck. And for what it's worth, I wish I could have met her. She sounds amazing. She was. Mason loaded the last box. But she's gone, and I'm here, and so are you, and I'm learning that's okay. They drove to the donation center together, Caleb chattering in the back seat about his science project. Dropped off the boxes, watched them disappear into the building, and Mason felt something release in his chest. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but letting go enough to move forward. The weeks turned into months. Victoria kept her promise, cut back her hours, delegated more, took actual weekends off. It wasn't perfect. She still worked too late sometimes, still stressed about board meetings and investor calls. But she was trying, and that mattered. Mason tried too. Went on dates with Victoria where they did normal things. Movies, dinners, walking through parks. Let himself be happy without guilt. Let himself imagine a future that didn't revolve around grief. Caleb thrived. His science project won second place at the school fair. He made new friends, started talking about space camp next summer. And he stopped asking if Mason was going to die, stopped having nightmares about being alone. Like maybe he was healing too. 6 months after the blizzard, Victoria showed up at Mason's door with an unusual request. I want to go back, she said. Back where? To the cabin. To Black Ridge Mountain. She met his eyes. I need to see it again. Without the storm, without the terror. Just see it. Mason understood. Okay. When? This weekend, if you're free? They drove up Saturday morning, Caleb in the back seat playing games on a tablet Victoria had bought him. The mountain looked different in sunshine, beautiful instead of threatening, peaceful instead of violent. They found the cabin easily, no longer hidden by snow. It was smaller than Mason remembered, more run down, but still standing. This is it? Caleb looked disappointed. It's so tiny. Felt bigger when we were freezing to death, Mason said. They explored the cabin together, found the fireplace where they'd huddled for warmth, the cot where Caleb had slept, the kitchen where Victoria had learned to make terrible coffee. Evidence of their survival scattered like breadcrumbs. I was so scared, Victoria said quietly, standing by the window. I thought we were going to die here. We almost did. Mason came to stand beside her. But we didn't. We made it. We made it. She turned to look at him. And it changed everything. For the better? Yeah, for the better. Victoria took his hand. I know I'm still a work in progress. Still learning how to balance everything. Still screwing up more than I get right. But I'm trying. Because of you. Because of what we found here. What did we find? Each other. Hope. A reason to be better. She smiled. Terrible coffee-making skills. Mason laughed. Yeah, those too. Those, Caleb called from outside. He'd found the woodpile still there under its tarp. They went to join him, and together they gathered wood and built a fire in the old fireplace. Not because they needed it, but because it felt right. Like closing a circle. They sat by the fire while afternoon sun streamed through the windows, and Caleb told them facts about stars and black holes and the heat death of the universe. And Victoria listened like it mattered, and Mason watched them both and thought, this is it. This is what happiness looks like. Not perfect, not without struggles or doubts or fears, but real, honest, worth fighting for. Dad? Caleb looked up from the fire. Can we come back here sometime, like for camping? Yeah, buddy. We can do that. Mason glanced at Victoria. Maybe make it a tradition. I'd like that, Victoria said. Annual trips to the place that changed everything. The place that almost killed us, Mason corrected. Same thing. She leaned against him. Sometimes the things that almost kill us are the things that save us. They stayed until evening, then drove back to Chicago as the sun set behind the mountains. And Mason realized that for the first time since Sarah died, he wasn't looking backward, wasn't dwelling on what he'd lost or what could have been. He was looking forward, at Victoria beside him, at Caleb in the back seat, at the life they were building together. Imperfect, messy, sometimes uncertain, but theirs. And that was enough. Because sometimes survival isn't about making it through unscathed. Sometimes it's about being broken and finding someone else who's broken too, and building something new from the pieces. Sometimes it's about learning that the walls we build to protect ourselves are the same walls that keep us alone. Sometimes it's about taking a chance on connection, even when everything says to play it safe. Sometimes love shows up in a blizzard, in a stranger's knock on the door, in the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. Mason had learned that. Victoria had learned that. And together, they'd learned that being afraid doesn't mean you stop trying. It just means you're alive. And being alive, really truly alive, was worth every risk.